Welcome to episode 9 of 6460, where I tell you about 6 things that I love about Star Trek in celebration of their 60th anniversary. So, this week I want to talk about weapons. Now, normally when people think of science fiction, they think of a phaser or laser gun or something similar. And there is no shortage of phasers and phaser fights in Star Trek. But the phaser does not land in my top 6 favorite weapons, although they're fun. um, so, my first favorite weapon in the Star Trek universe is the Doomsday Machine. And we see that in the original series, season 2, episode 6, called The Doomsday Machine. And so essentially, it's a giant Thanksgiving cornucopia. My husband likes to call it a giant flashlight that destroys entire planets. And so, as usual, Kirk and crew come in to save the day. But I like this episode because it's classic Star Trek. They use their ingenuity and their willingness to sacrifice in order to save the day. So they eventually sacrifice the first starship that arrived on the scene. And of course, there's a beautiful lesson at the end of the episode, which is basically we need to be careful with what we do because the supposition is that this is technology run amok. That they created this huge planet killer to kill some alien, some foe, and now it has run amok, destroyed the original creators, and is now causing wreaking havoc through the galaxy. So again, I think it's a perfect, classic, timeless Star Trek episode, and that's why the Doomsday Machine is one of my favorite weapons. Okay, so my second favorite, and truly they're not in a real order, but second on my list is the Tholian web, and that is in season 3, episode 9. And the web isn't a offensive weapon; it's a defensive weapon. So there, the Enterprise is responding to a distress signal from another Federation ship, the Defiant. Yay, DS9 fans. That's the first Defiant. And they roll into Tholian space. And of course, Spock is like, no, this is unclaimed space. And the Tholians are like, nah, we're going to claim it. And so they begin to defend their section of space by having these smaller ships build essentially an energy weapon, energy web around the Enterprise. Now, even though the title of the show is Tholian Web, really the focus of the show is about the crew trying to save Kirk, who has gotten lost in kind of an inner space. The fabric of space-time is thin there, and he's kind of lost, and they're trying to rescue him. But I really like the Tholian Web because it's a non-aggressive type of weapon, primarily for defense. My third weapon on this list today in my 6 for 60 is from originally Wrath of Khan, but featured, it really comes about as a weapon in Lower Decks, season 4, episode 10, Old Friends, New Planets. And it's the Genesis device. So we all know in Wrath of Khan, he's out to get Kirk, and he stumbles upon this Genesis device that his wife just happens to be, his former lover happens to be developing with his unknown son. So lots of intrigue there and fun things about it. But in Wrath of Khan, when they learn about the Genesis device, Bones gives a warning. He's like, wait a minute, this might sound like a good thing, but this could be used as a weapon. It could be used for evil. And everybody kind of poo-poos him, and you don't hear about it anymore until we get to Lower Decks, where it is actually used as a weapon, or attempted to be used as a weapon. And it's a much smaller version that of course has been monetized by the Ferengi. It's really funny. Again, I know a lot of folks don't like Lower Decks, but give it a try. It's really a fun iteration of Star Trek. Anyway, I really I like it because it was kind of prophetic. Bones told you this could be really dangerous and be used as a weapon, and now we see it in just that fashion. Okay, so number 4 on my list is Voyager, season 4, episodes 8 and 9, The Year of Hell, part 1 and 2. And I've mentioned The Year of Hell before. It's just excellent. It's a really great starting place. If you're not sure about watching Voyager, I would just jump right in with The Year of Hell. Great 2 episodes. But in this, it's the time shift. So the Krenin, it's an alien race. They were in a war, and scientists developed this time shift. They're like, look, if we can't beat you with regular weapons, we're just going to wipe you out of existence. So that's what they do. They do all these, it's a math based weapon, which I love. And they do all these calculations to essentially wipe their enemies, remove key technological advances for them so they're no longer a threat. And they do all these things to win the war. But in truth, one of the after effects is that the lead scientist, his planet or moon where he was living with his wife gets destroyed, and he is trying to bring his wife and family back. And so at one point, he even achieves, I think it's something like a 99 point something restoration of the timeline, but his wife isn't back. And so he's like, nope, we're just going to keep going until he gets his wife back. So again, another, classic Star Trek lesson. You can do things, you might even think you're doing it for good, but in the end, if you're out hurting other people, things just aren't going to work out for you. And at one point, he is in conversation with Chakotay because, of course, beautiful, empathetic, just yearning for new knowledge and just always intrigued by the universe and how things work. Chakotay is identifying with this scientist, and he's willing to work with him and try to help him get what he wants. And I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's also thinking, hey, if he can fix this timeline, he can fix our timeline and send us back home to the Alpha Quadrant. But it does not work out, unfortunately, and they end up with help from the time shift's crew because they're tired of this. They want to go home. All their family is dead. They just lost a sense of purpose and direction because they've been doing this for so long, and they just want to go home. They just want it to be over with. And they help sabotage from the inside. And Janeway is working with others on the outside, and they manage to destroy the time ship, which resets the Krenin timeline, and he's back with his wife. So, supposedly with a lesson learned, so that one of his regrets, I'm just telling the whole thing, one of his regrets was that he did not pay attention and spend time with his wife when he had the opportunity. And, once the time ship is destroyed, he puts down his pen one day and goes off with his wife to enjoy the day. So at one point, they suppose that the universe and the time itself has a vendetta against the scientist because it refuses to allow him to get his wife back. So, who knows? Always like the little questions Star Trek leaves you pondering at the end of an episode. Okay, number 5 is TNG. 1 minute. Season 7, episodes 4 and 5, The Gambit, parts 1 and 2. Now, I had to look this weapon's name up. Apparently, it has a name. It's called the Stone of Gaul, but I would just call it the Vulcan emotional weapon. So in this, Picard's doing some undercover work, and but the bottom line is that there are Vulcans who believe that they should have never listened to Sirach. They should have never gone down this path of peace, and they want to return Vulcan back to its time of fierce warrior-ness and feel that they could, rule the whole galaxy. And so they're in search of this ancient weapon that was supposedly so powerful. So what we find out in the end is that the weapon only works when an adversary is being violent and angry. It uses your own negative emotions against you. So that if you are calm and rational and reasonable, it has no effect on you, which is a perfect weapon for Vulcans to have. And it kind of explains why why the weapon was no longer useful once the Vulcans embraced the path of peace. So I thought that was a great twist, a great storyline. It was just really good. It was interesting and novel. Okay, and my last 6/4/60, and my favorite one, if I had to pick up an absolute favorite, would be TOS, the Corbinite Maneuver, and that's in season 1, episode 10. And in this episode, the Enterprise, we run across what appears to be a really strong and potent enemy. Their ship is massive. We don't believe that we can defeat them. But at the end, Kirk uses the best, the most Federation, the most Starfleet weapon of all, his mind. And they trick the aliens into believing that they've got this Corbomite maneuver, which will not just destroy the ship, but everything around it, and many sectors around them will be uninhabitable for many years to come. They basically just psych out the enemy. And then we find out the enemy, who really is not an enemy, is also psyching us out because the ship is all just pretense, and the alien within is really just a tiny little person played by, I believe, Ron Howard's brother as a child actor. So it's, really awesome. I appreciated that episode a lot. So I'm not going to make this a habit, but it feels like it's becoming a habit. A little tiny bonus, because you cannot discuss Star Trek weapons without talking about the Klingon Batleth. So the Batleth, of course, you see it through all of Star Trek, and it's more than just a weapon. It is a kind of embodiment of Klingon fierceness and the warrior code. There's a certain amount of art that goes with the movements and the fighting posture and style to use the Batleth. It's very personal. They're handed down through generations. You just cannot get anything more personal, because it kind of represents that up close, hand to hand combat that Klingon warriors desire, because they want to get up close. They want to smell their enemy's breath and be there to see the fire go out in their eyes when they realize they've been defeated by a mighty Klingon warrior. So the Batleth kind of stands alone, and it's not just a weapon per se. So that is my 6/60. I thank you for hanging out with me today. Again, live long and prosper, my friends. Join me for Follow-Up Friday. Make some comments. Let me know what your favorite weapons are from the movies or from the shows. And I think next week we will talk about technology. Yay! And that could be like 12 episodes all by itself. Or really, you could just talk the whole year just about Star Trek technology. But we're going to do it in an episode or two. And I look forward to talking with you, friends.